In the winter of 1890, beneath chandeliers that shimmered like captive constellations above London's most fashionable ballroom, a silence spread more swiftly than music. It began as a whisper behind an ivory fan, drifted between gentlemen in black tailcoats, and then settled across the hall like frost upon a garden. Every eye turned toward the entrance. The Duchess of Ashcombe had arrived. Once Lady Marybeth Ashcombe had been greeted with admiration wherever she appeared. Mothers had pointed her out to their daughters. Newspapers had praised her grace. Noblemen had competed for the honor of a single dance. Yet on this evening, the faces that watched her held neither warmth nor welcome. They held judgment. Marybeth paused beneath the glow of crystal lamps. Her gown of silver silk caught the light with quiet elegance, but elegance could not shield a woman from cruelty. She felt the weight of 100 stares pressing against her shoulders. Conversation ceased, smiles faded, even the musicians seemed uncertain whether to continue. For the crime society could never forgive the young Duchess had married a stableman. The whispers followed her like shadows. Such a waste. She has disgraced her title. A duchess wed to a groom, imagine it, how desperate she must have been. Marybeth kept her chin high. Years of noble upbringing had taught her how to endure public scrutiny, yet no training prepared a woman for becoming an object of ridicule. Every murmur struck with the precision of a needle. Only 6 months earlier, her future had appeared certain. She had been engaged to Lord Frederick Pembroke, a gentleman whose family name carried influence throughout England. Their marriage promised security, prestige, and approval from every corner of society. Then death arrived without warning. A riding accident on a rain-soaked road ended Frederick's life before wedding vows could be spoken. The tragedy plunged Marybeth into mourning. For weeks she moved through her estate like a ghost, untouched by sunlight or comfort. During those dark days, one person remained present, Thomas Hawthorne. He tended the horses on her country estate. He possessed no title, no fortune, and no distinguished ancestry that anyone knew of. Yet whenever grief threatened to overwhelm her, she found him nearby, offering neither empty promises nor rehearsed sympathy. He listened. In a world filled with people eager to speak, Thomas understood the rare kindness of silence. Their friendship grew slowly, almost invisibly, like ivy climbing ancient stone. Long walks became conversations. Conversations became trust. Trust became affection. When they married, society responded with outrage. The newspapers called it madness. The aristocracy called it humiliation. Friends vanished. Invitations ceased. Entire drawing rooms spoke of Marybeth as though she had thrown away a crown. Now she stood amid the consequences. Across the ballroom, a cluster of ladies exchanged glances before turning deliberately away. A gentleman who had once begged for introductions suddenly discovered fascination in the opposite wall. "You no longer belong among us." Marybeth drew a slow breath and moved forward. Beside her walked Thomas. Unlike the nobles surrounding them, he wore no expression of discomfort. His black evening coat was simple compared to the lavish fashions on display, yet somehow he carried it with natural confidence. He neither hurried nor hesitated. The insult seemed unable to reach him. That mystery unsettled people almost as much as the marriage itself. A man who knew his place ought to feel ashamed. Thomas never did. As they approached a gathering of distinguished guests, conversation abruptly halted. An elderly countess examined Marybeth with open disapproval. "My dear Duchess," she said, emphasizing the title as though questioning her right to possess it, "London continues to surprise us." Several listeners concealed smiles. Marybeth answered with practiced courtesy. "I hope the surprises remain pleasant, Lady Winthrop." The countess lifted an eyebrow. "One doubts that very much." Soft laughter followed. Thomas merely inclined his head. The countess expected embarrassment. His calm response denied her satisfaction. Moments later, a gentleman nearby spoke loudly enough for others to hear. "A duchess may marry beneath herself, but she cannot drag the rest of us down with her." This time the laughter was less restrained. Heat rose within Marybeth's chest. For one terrible moment she wished the polished floor would open beneath her feet. She wondered whether everyone had been right. Perhaps she had destroyed her future. Perhaps love had demanded too much. Her gaze lowered. Then Thomas spoke. His voice was quiet, yet somehow it carried through the noise surrounding them. "Your Grace," he said gently, "the opinion of a crowded room has never altered the worth of a single soul." Marybeth looked up. Their eyes met. The ballroom disappeared. The whispers vanished. Only certainty remained. Thomas offered his hand. The orchestra had begun another waltz. Around them, couples filled the dance floor, yet none expected what happened next. "May I have this dance?" he asked. Gasps fluttered across the room. Marybeth knew exactly what society wanted. They wanted shame, retreat, submission. Instead, she placed her hand in his. Together they stepped onto the floor. The movement of the waltz carried them beneath rivers of golden light. Nobles watched in disbelief as the Duchess and her stableman crossed the ballroom with effortless grace. Their composure transformed mockery into something far more uncomfortable: admiration. No matter how fiercely society judged them, they remained unbroken. When the music ended, applause never came. The silence felt louder. Yet for the first time that evening, Maribeth smiled. Much later, after the final carriage departed and the city settled beneath midnight fog, a servant arrived at their residence carrying a sealed letter. The envelope bore an unfamiliar crest. Thomas accepted it. He broke the seal alone in his study. As his eyes moved across the contents, something changed. The man who had faced ridicule without hesitation suddenly became still, very still. For the first time all evening, concern entered his expression. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Inside, Thomas folded the letter slowly and stared into the fire. Months passed and spring arrived reluctantly across the English countryside. Pale sunlight returned to the gardens of Ashcombe Manor, coaxing roses toward bloom and painting the hills with fresh green. Yet no season could soften the chill society reserved for the Duchess of Ashcombe and the man she had chosen to marry. At luncheons, Maribeth's name became a cautionary tale. In drawing rooms, mothers warned daughters against allowing sentiment to outrun good judgment. Newspapers that once praised her refinement now treated her as a curiosity. Some mocked her openly, others disguised cruelty as concern. Maribeth endured it with grace, but grace required strength, and strength was not limitless. One morning she stood alone in the manor library, watching rain trail down tall windows. Beyond the glass, Thomas crossed the courtyard carrying a saddle over one shoulder. Servants greeted him warmly. Stable boys respected him, yet among the aristocracy he remained unwelcome. A quiet knock interrupted her thoughts. She turned. Thomas entered carrying a polished wooden box. "I hope I am not disturbing you," he said. "You never do." A shadow of a smile touched his face. "Then I have something for you." He placed the box upon a table. The craftsmanship alone was remarkable. Dark walnut panels gleamed beneath the library lamps. Intricate carvings curled along the edges. Maribeth lifted the lid carefully. Inside rested an antique music box. When she wound the mechanism, a delicate melody drifted through the room, sweet and haunting as a memory. Hidden beneath the velvet lining, she discovered something else: a crest. Its design was elegant but unfamiliar. A rearing lion stood above crossed anchors and a crown. Maribeth traced the symbol with her fingertips. "I do not recognize this family." Thomas looked toward the window. "I did not expect you would. Whose crest is it?" For a moment she thought he might answer. Instead he said quietly, "Keep it safe." Weeks later, another scandal swept through London. Rumors spread that Thomas possessed access to wealth impossible for a stableman to obtain. Someone claimed he had been seen meeting influential businessmen. Another insisted he maintained secret accounts in northern banks. By the time gossip completed its journey through society, tales of hidden fortunes and criminal schemes followed his name. At a dinner party attended by several prominent families, Maribeth found herself trapped beside a woman notorious for collecting rumors. "My dear Duchess," the woman said, lowering her voice theatrically, "surely you know where your husband acquires his money." Maribeth remained calm. "My husband earns his living honestly." "Of course," came the reply, "though honesty appears remarkably profitable these days." Laughter rippled around the table. Maribeth set down her glass. Those who lack facts often compensate with imagination. The smile vanished from the woman's face. For the remainder of the evening, no one spoke directly to Maribeth. The isolation deepened. Evenings became quieter. Invitations became rarer. More than once, Maribeth questioned whether love alone could withstand relentless judgment. One stormy night, she finally voiced the fear she had concealed for months. Rain battered the manor windows. Firelight flickered across the drawing room. Thomas sat opposite her, reading correspondence. "May I ask you something?" she said. He closed the letter immediately. "Always," she hesitated. The question felt dangerous. "Do you regret marrying me?" Silence followed. Outside, thunder rolled across distant hills. Thomas regarded her steadily. "Why would you ask that?" "Because everything changed after our wedding." She forced herself to continue. "You lost your privacy, your reputation suffers because of me, every gathering becomes a trial, every whisper becomes another wound." Her voice softened. "If you regret it, I would rather know." Thomas rose from his chair. He crossed the room slowly, then he knelt beside her. The gesture startled her more than any declaration could have. "Maribeth," he said, "look at me." She did. "I did not marry a title. I married the woman who remained kind when the world rewarded cruelty." Emotion tightened her throat. Thomas continued, "You believe I have sacrificed something. The truth is quite different." His gaze drifted briefly toward the fire. "There was another life once." The words emerged carefully. "A life I chose to leave behind." Maribeth felt her pulse quicken. Another life. The phrase opened countless possibilities. Had there been another family, another woman? Another name, you have hidden things from me, she whispered. Yes, why? Because some histories create burdens for those we love. The answer explained nothing, yet the sadness in his expression prevented further questions. Before she could speak again, a servant appeared at the doorway. Sir, an elderly gentleman has arrived. Thomas stiffened. His name, Mr. Whitmore. For the first time since Maribeth had known him, genuine alarm crossed Thomas's face. The visitor was shown into the study. When Thomas finally emerged, he appeared exhausted. Maribeth noticed legal documents tucked beneath his arm. Who was he? A solicitor. And what did he want? Thomas paused. Something I am not ready to discuss. Instead, he surprised her with an excursion beyond the estate. They rode across rolling countryside until reaching a secluded hill overlooking fields bathed in afternoon sunlight. Wildflowers swayed in the breeze. Thomas removed a small silver locket from his pocket. This belongs to you now. Maribeth opened it carefully. Inside rested the portrait of a beautiful young woman. Dark hair, gentle eyes, a familiar sadness. Who is she? My mother. The answer carried immense tenderness. Maribeth closed the locket softly. She was lovely. Yes, they stood together in silence. That evening, however, curiosity overcame caution. Passing near the study, Maribeth heard voices through the partially open door. Then a sentence stopped her cold. If Mr. Hawthorne refuses the inheritance much longer, the solicitor said, the entire Hawthorne fortune will remain without an heir. Maribeth froze. Inheritance, fortune, heir. The words echoed through her mind. The stableman she had married was connected to a fortune vast enough to concern lawyers and estates. And suddenly, every unanswered question became far more important than before. The invitation arrived embossed in gold and sealed with the crest of one of London's oldest noble families. Maribeth understood its purpose immediately. The Duchess of Wexford had never hidden her contempt. This was not an invitation born of friendship. It was an invitation to witness humiliation. On the evening of the spring ball, carriages rolled through streets illuminated by gaslight. Maribeth sat beside Thomas in silence. You need not attend, Thomas said, and permit them to believe they have frightened me away. A faint smile appeared. There is the Maribeth I know. When they entered the ballroom, conversations shifted, people watched, people remembered, people whispered. The Duchess of Wexford greeted them with polished courtesy. Your Grace, how delightful that you could join us. Her eyes moved toward Thomas, and Mr. Hawthorne as well. The distinction was deliberate. As the evening progressed, the pattern repeated. Gentlemen greeted Maribeth while overlooking her husband. Ladies spoke around him as though he were invisible. One young lord even mistook him for a servant and attempted to hand him a champagne glass. Thomas accepted the mistake with calm dignity. The embarrassed nobleman retreated first, yet Maribeth's anger grew not because society insulted her, because it insulted him. The orchestra began another waltz. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across the polished floor. Then something unusual happened. A servant entered and whispered urgently to the hostess. Moments later, another appeared, then another. Outside, additional carriages were arriving, one after another. The names announced at the entrance caused murmurs throughout the room. Industrial magnates, banking directors, shipping executives, influential members of parliament. Several possessed fortunes rivaling ancient aristocratic families, yet they did not gather around the hostess. Instead, they crossed the ballroom toward Thomas. The first gentleman extended his hand. Mr. Hawthorne, it is an honor to see you again. The second offered similar respect. The third greeted him as though greeting a superior. Whispers became astonishment. A circle formed around Thomas. No one understood. At last, an elderly gentleman stepped forward. His silver hair gleamed beneath the chandeliers. Many guests recognized him immediately. Mr. Whitmore, the solicitor. The ballroom gradually fell silent. Ladies and gentlemen, Whitmore announced, circumstances require clarification. Every eye fixed upon him. The gentleman you know as Thomas Hawthorne is also the sole surviving heir to the Hawthorne commercial dynasty. Shock swept through the crowd. The Hawthorne name carried enormous weight. For decades, the family controlled shipping routes, railway interests, ports, warehouses, and investments across the empire. Their fortune ranked among Britain's greatest. Whitmore continued. Following family tragedies, Mr. Hawthorne chose to live outside public attention. He rejected privilege and title alike. Nevertheless, the inheritance remains legally his. Silence deepened. The stableman, the groom, the object of countless jokes, he was one of the wealthiest men in England. Maribeth looked at her husband. At last the mysteries aligned, the crest, the solicitor, the hidden correspondence, the unexplained confidence. Thomas had never pretended to be important. He had simply refused to advertise it. Around the ballroom, expressions transformed with astonishing speed. Those who had mocked him suddenly smiled. Those who had ignored Maribeth suddenly sought conversation. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. The Duchess of Wexford stepped forward. Mr. Hawthorne, I fear we have all misunderstood. No, Thomas said calmly. The interruption froze her. You understood perfectly. The words were polite, their meaning was not. A hush settled across the room. Thomas turned toward the assembled guests. When you believed me poor, you judged me unworthy. No one spoke. When you believed me ordinary, you found amusement in my presence. Several faces reddened, and now that you discover I possess wealth, your opinions have changed within a single evening. The silence became painful. Then Thomas extended his hand toward Maribeth. She moved beside him. His expression softened instantly. This woman stood beside me when she had every reason to walk away. Emotion shimmered in Maribeth's eyes. She endured ridicule without complaint. She sacrificed acceptance, friendships, and comfort, not for a fortune, not for influence, for me. The room listened. When I possessed nothing in your eyes, she remained loyal. Now that you believe I possess everything, your approval arrives far too late. No speech could have struck harder. For once there were no whispers, only truth. Thomas reached into his coat and withdrew a document. I have finally accepted the inheritance, he said. A ripple moved through the crowd. But not because I desired wealth. He looked at Maribeth. I accepted it because she taught me that a good life is not measured by what one owns but by whom one loves. Tears gathered in Maribeth's eyes. Then unexpectedly applause began. A single pair of hands, then another. Soon the entire ballroom echoed with applause, not for the fortune, not for the inheritance, for the courage that had exposed the emptiness of prejudice. Months later, summer settled over Ashcombe Manor. Roses climbed stone walls, bees drifted through fragrant gardens, the noise of London felt distant. One evening, Maribeth and Thomas walked beneath a sky painted gold by the setting sun. No reporters followed them, no gossip surrounded them. The world had finally grown quiet. Do you miss it? Maribeth asked. Miss what? The mystery. Thomas laughed softly. Not particularly. She smiled. Neither do I. They continued along the garden path hand in hand. Behind them stood wealth enough to astonish a nation. Ahead stretched something rarer, peace. Their laughter returned slowly, replacing old wounds with gratitude, trust, companionship, and joy at last forever. And as twilight settled across the estate, the story society had once mocked became the story it remembered. Not because a stableman inherited a fortune, but because two people proved that character is revealed when admiration is absent, and love is proven when there is nothing to gain. In the end, the aristocracy learned a lesson no title could teach. Wealth may command attention, power may command obedience. But only devotion commands the heart, and that, at last, was the greatest inheritance of all.